My mom always compared me to my older brother, the athlete, the charmer. Why can't you be more like him? She'd say. Years later, he disappeared after a scandal. I found him broken and desperate. I helped him start over. Mom cried. I just said, now we're both who we are. My mother always compared me to my older brother, Jake, the athlete, the charmer, the golden boy of our family. Why can't you be more like him? She would say, her words sharp and unrelenting, cutting into my sense of self like a dull blade. For years, I lived in his shadow, my identity shaped by the constant refrain of inadequacy. Then, abruptly, Jake vanished after a devastating scandal. When I found him, broken and desperate, I made the choice to help him start over. My mother wept when she saw him again. I looked at her and said, now we're both who we are. Our childhood home sat on the edge of a small Midwest town, where life revolved around two pillars: high school football and Sunday church services. Jake was the embodiment of the town's dreams, star quarterback, prom king, and local legend. His smile could disarm even the sternest teacher, his charisma a magnet that drew people to him effortlessly. Trophies lined his bedroom shelves, each one a testament to his prowess, while girlfriends flocked to him, captivated by his easy confidence. I, by contrast, was the shadow, quiet, introspective, and invisible. My days were spent buried in books at the library during lunch breaks or tending to abandoned animals at the local shelter on weekends. My achievements, good grades, a poetry award, a volunteer certificate, were footnotes, barely acknowledged in the glow of Jake's brilliance. Mother's favoritism was not subtle. She radiated pride at Jake's every triumph, her eyes sparkling as she recounted his latest game to neighbors or relatives. My accomplishments, however, were met with a distracted nod or a perfunctory, "That's nice." I recall vividly the day I won a regional science fair in 10th grade. I returned home, my heart pounding with excitement, clutching a modest trophy that represented hours of research and dedication. I presented it to her, hoping for a moment of recognition. She glanced at it, her expression fleeting, and said, "That's great, honey. Did you see Jake's game last night? He threw 3 touchdowns." My triumph evaporated, swallowed by the ever-present comparison. That phrase, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" echoed in my mind, a broken record of doubt and inadequacy that followed me through adolescence. After high school, our paths diverged sharply. Jake earned a football scholarship to a prestigious college, his name splashed across local newspapers as the town's pride. I enrolled in the local community college, working part-time jobs, stocking shelves at the grocery store, tutoring younger students, to pay my way. Our contact dwindled. He was the golden boy still, chasing glory, while I grappled with finding my place in a world that seemed to value only his kind of success. I studied hard, majoring in environmental science, driven by a quiet passion for the natural world and a desire to carve out a life of purpose. Yet, even as I built my own modest existence, the weight of my mother's words lingered, a quiet ache in my chest. Then came the scandal that shattered everything. News broke that Jake was implicated in a betting scheme, accused of throwing college games for money. The headlines were merciless: star quarterback caught in gambling ring. The town's hero fell from grace overnight. His college suspended him, his teammates turned their backs, and his career, once a golden path to the pros, lay in ruins. Mother was devastated, but her grief seemed less about Jake's well-being and more about the loss of the image she had cultivated. She sat for hours in the living room, clutching old photo albums filled with pictures of Jake in his uniform, murmuring about his squandered potential. "He had everything," she'd whisper, "as if I weren't there, as if my efforts to build a stable life meant nothing." Jake disappeared after that. No calls, no letters, no trace. Mother slipped into denial, insisting he just needed time to sort himself out. I tried to move forward, graduating with my degree and landing a job as an environmental consultant, assessing local ecosystems for development projects. I rented a small apartment, adopted a rescue dog named Max, and built a quiet, steady life. But Jake's absence gnawed at me. Where was he? Was he safe? The questions lingered, a quiet undercurrent to my days, even as I buried myself in work and routine. Years passed, 3 to be exact. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a photograph that stopped me cold. It was a candid shot, posted by a stranger, of a man playing guitar on a street corner in a city several states away. He was thin, unshaven, his clothes worn, but something about his posture, the tilt of his head, the ghost of a smile, struck a chord. I zoomed in, my heart racing. It was Jake. His eyes, once bright with confidence, were dim, but unmistakable. I stared at the image for hours, torn between disbelief and a desperate need to act. I made a decision. I took a leave of absence from work, packed a bag, and drove 8 hours to that city, a bustling urban sprawl far from our quiet town. I searched for days, street corners, parks, shelters, asking strangers if they'd seen the man with the guitar. On the 4th day, I found him at a shelter, sitting on a cot, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug. He was gaunt, his face etched with lines of hardship, his eyes hollow. He looked up, and for a moment time froze. Recognition flickered, followed by a wave of shame that clouded his features. We didn't speak at first. The silence between us carried the weight of years, years of distance, of unspoken hurt, of lives lived apart. I sat beside him, and eventually, he whispered, "I didn't want you to see me like this." He told me his story in fragments over the next few hours. After the scandal, the pressure and disgrace had broken him. He'd lost his scholarship, his friends, his sense of self. He turned to alcohol, then drifted from city to city, taking odd jobs, busking for change, sleeping in shelters or on the streets. He hadn't contacted us because the shame was too great, the fear of mother's judgment too heavy. I listened, my heart aching for the brother I'd once idolized, now a stranger reduced to survival. I couldn't leave him there. I convinced him to come home with me, promising no judgment, only support. We returned to my apartment, Max wagging his tail as if sensing Jake's need for comfort. I researched rehabilitation programs and found one nearby, a 6-month intensive course to address addiction and rebuild life skills. I drove him to the facility, paid the initial fees with my savings, and visited weekly, bringing books, clothes, and encouragement. The road was not smooth. There were relapses, nights when he'd disappear, only to return disheveled and apologetic. There were breakdowns, moments when he'd sob, "I'm not worth this," and I'd hold his hand, insisting he was. But slowly progress emerged. He completed the program, his eyes regaining a spark, his frame filling out as he ate regularly again. I helped him find work, a job at a hardware store, simple but steady. He started volunteering at the animal shelter with me, a quiet echo of my own teenage refuge. One day, he showed me a painting he'd done, a vivid landscape of the Midwest fields we'd grown up near, all golds and greens, a testament to a new creativity blooming within him. I framed it and hung it in my living room, a symbol of his rebirth. The day I brought Jake to see Mother was fraught with tension. I hadn't told her I'd found him, unsure how she'd react. We arrived at the house, and when she opened the door, time seemed to pause. She stared at Jake, her eyes wide, then collapsed into sobs, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "I'm so sorry," she cried, her voice breaking. She apologized to him for the pressure she'd placed on him, for the pedestal that had crushed him when it fell. Then she turned to me, tears streaming down her face, and said, "I'm sorry too. I never saw you, not really. I was wrong." The words, so long awaited, settled over me like a bomb, healing wounds I'd carried for years. Jake forgave her, his voice steady, his hand on her shoulder. I nodded, my own forgiveness quiet but genuine. We began to rebuild as a family. Dinners, once battlegrounds of comparison, became spaces of connection. We shared stories, Jake's tales of painting and volunteering, my accounts of environmental projects, Mother's reflections on her own growth. Laughter, tentative at first, grew warmer, stronger. Jake and I, once worlds apart, found common ground. Long walks with Max, late-night talks about dreams and regrets. A bond forged from brokenness and redemption. Our journey was not perfect. There were still hard days. Moments when old hurts resurfaced, when Mother slipped into old habits, when Jake doubted himself. But we faced them together, a trio learning to see each other anew. The town, too, began to accept Jake again, not as the golden boy, but as a man rebuilding his life with courage. When people asked about our story, I'd reflect on the years of pain, the search, the healing, and say simply, now we're both who we are. We had found our way, not as shadows or stars, but as individuals, flawed, resilient, and whole.